Hi everybody, welcome to another episode of the Stellium Astrology podcast. We've just had our 100th episode not long ago, and very soon we will be having our second birthday episode. My mind boggles at the thought that I've been doing this for 2 years, and I have only missed, I think, one episode, which was when I had COVID. And even then, I probably could have done it, but I decided when your body tells you to rest, you need to rest. So, I'm quite amazed, actually, that I'm reaching such milestones in my my solo podcasting career. If you've just tuned in for the first time, I'm Stephanie James, and I am the host of this podcast and the founder of StelliumAstrology.com. I am also the former horoscope columnist for Elle Magazine UK, and I teach occasionally for the London School of Astrology. And I decided to set up this podcast because I love to talk about astrology, as I'm sure you're probably aware. Regular listeners will be well aware of how much I enjoy waffling on about my favourite subject. Just recently, because I've had a little boy, and it's coming up to his first birthday too. Well, his first birthday, not his second, like the podcast. I've decided to keep going, to have some consistency and continuity with the podcast. I just have to steal my moments where I can. I feel like I haven't put my teeth in today, by the way, if I sound like I'm talking in a weird way. I am pulled up on the side of the road. We're due to go to something called Parrot's Playground in a little while. Parrot's Playground is a baby sensory thing, and my little boy absolutely loves it, and actually so do I. I love all the bright lights and singing the songs, and just, it's really good fun. One of the songs my little boy loves is the one that goes, wind the bobbin up, pull, pull, clap, clap, clap. He's learnt to clap recently. He's started to walk recently. It really is, it is so amazing. I know that there's people out there without babies who are like, who cares? But I used to be like you. I also used to be like you. And then when you have a baby son, you're like, oh my God, it's the most amazing thing. And it really is. But I tell you what is interesting about having a baby is learning about yourself from a lunar perspective. I've very much shifted into my moon. I'm very aware of it. But that is a story for another time. Today I'm going to continue with our series on Synastry. This is a shorter episode today. I've got a couple of ideas, but I thought, why not? Let's explore, can you hear Synastry? Now, I thought it would be an interesting subject because you definitely can hear Synastry. Two people that spring to mind, very obvious, and it's good because they're very well known, and also they have got relatively reliable birth chart data, I believe. Who have I selected at the moment? Yeah, let me just select the second chart. Is Paul McCartney and John Lennon. Now, off the top of my head, really annoyingly, I don't know what their data, whether it's trustworthy data or not. Let me just double check. So, John Lennon birth chart. As usual, if I can, I'll always get the data from astro.com. It is the most reliable source of chart data. So, John Lennon's got an A rating. He's born on the 9th of October 1940 at 6:30 p.m. in Liverpool in England. He has an A-rated chart, and he has Sun in Libra, Moon in Aquarius, and his ascendant is Aries. Now, let's have a quick look for Paul McCartney, who will be linked on his profile, and it is, yeah. So Paul McCartney was born on the 18th of June 1942 at 2 p.m. in the afternoon, also A-rated, born in England, in Liverpool. And he has a Gemini sun, Leo moon, and a Virgo ascendant. So I think the thing that my favourite Beatle is actually, oh yeah, by the way, they're in the Beatles if you don't know. And there might be younger people who don't. I remember when Kanye West did a duet with Paul McCartney on some kind of music. I don't know if it was on a festival, might have been Glastonbury or something like that. And people were like, oh my God, it's so great that Kanye's giving these new artists a platform to break through. This was like a lot of younger people who had not heard of Paul McCartney before, which just, I couldn't believe it. On Twitter, people were saying, oh my God, who is this Paul McCartney guy? It's like, bloody hell. That really does. I mean, I wasn't around when Paul McCartney was in his heyday, but it does make me feel old to think that I know who he is, and there are people out there that don't. I've had this episode planned for a while, actually, because Paul McCartney and John Lennon are both individually talented, and they both have very unique sounds to their music. Like I said, I don't want this to be a super long episode, and I know I can waffle on. Now, one of the things I think... I'll tell you what's interesting. So my ex-boyfriend, I told you about him before, he's a Pisces, Stellium, Leo rising, Gemini moon. He was in a band with a guy that I know. I met them long after their success, but the pair of them were in a band together. The guy he was in a band with was a Capricorn sun, Scorpio moon, and what ascendant did he have? Oh, that's annoying. I can't remember his ascendant now. I think it's Virgo. I think he had a Virgo ascendant, actually. And what I think was interesting was I know them separately, obviously, because I went out with, my ex, I went out with him. They're both really talented musicians, very talented. And when they were in the 90s, they were in a grunge band together that had, I'd say, they were kind of quite successful in the US for a very short period of time. But what's really interesting is that I went camping with them both. The band broke up, and then they were in various musical projects, and then they sort of got back in touch, and they were kind of quite pally again. And we used to all go and watch the football together and stuff like that. And when we went camping, we were on the drive on the way out there, and they both started to sing. And for the first time ever, I mean, I'd heard the recordings of their music and stuff, but you don't get the same feeling as you do when you're sitting in the same room as people who are, that they're kind of sound really good together, if you know what I mean. It's really hard. It's why live music, you can't always beat, live music over recorded, because there's something magical about the union of two, musical abilities, that when they're both of that same kind of calibre, they can create something unique. And when I heard them singing together for the first time in the room in front of me, well, in fact, in the car, they were both singing. I was like, wow, you guys sound brilliant together. And then I laughed, because I was like, of course you were signed. Of course you had a recording contract with Sony. Of course. It was state the bloody obvious. But it was just hearing it for the first time, I was like, holy crap, they really do sound good together. And I think that can be said for a lot of different bands. So going back to Paul McCartney and John Lennon, if you think about Paul McCartney's musical style, we'll look at his chart to start with. He's got a Gemini sun, quite playful, quite youthful. He's got a Leo moon, which is obviously, that naturally outgoing, both extrovert signs, really, both kind of active. And Paul McCartney's ascendant is Virgo, so it's a passive sign. It's very detail orientated. But that Gemini, so very mercurial, actually, Paul McCartney, if you think about it. He's got loads of planets in Gemini. He's got a Saturn-Uranus conjunction. I think, oh gosh, did Jimi Hendrix have the conjunction or the opposition? I can't remember. I think he had the conjunction as well. It's people who can bring the old and the new together. They can be innovative with old sounds. They can be pioneering with new sounds, in a musical sense. Someone like Jimi Hendrix, he really kind of brought the electric guitar to life for a lot of people. He reinvented the American national anthem. And then Paul McCartney's also got Mercury retrograde in Gemini. He's got midheaven in Gemini, and he's got his sun in Gemini as well. So he's got loads of planets in Gemini, with Mercury in its own rulership in there as well, with that very definitive, I think it's quite definitive and groundbreaking Saturn-Uranus conjunction. So that's quite a interesting and very youthful feeling stellium. And then he's got that Leo moon. He's also got Pluto in Leo, which a lot of people of a certain generation will have Pluto in Leo, because it moves quite slowly, and it cruised through Leo for a while. And Mars as well. He's got a Mars-Pluto conjunction. Do you remember me talking about that resilience? Think about Paul McCartney. He is still around. He's still doing his thing. Am I right in thinking he's in his 80s now? Did he just have his 80th? where are we? 1942, 52, 62, 72, 82, 92, 2002, 2012, 2022. Yeah, he's 80. He's 80 literally very soon, or has just had his 80th. I don't remember where we are. Oh, we're in July now, aren't we? My brain, please, baby brain. So he's just had his 80th birthday, and he's still getting up on stage and performing. Like a lot of these older rock stars are like, they can't drop the mic. They just can't do it. But if you're born to do it, you're born to do it, you know. He's got Jupiter in Cancer. I guess you could say almost that feels a little bit when you've got Sun in Gemini, Jupiter in Cancer. Jupiter is, makes people believe in you, I think, when you've got a Sun-Jupiter conjunction. And Jupiter in Cancer, Cancer is quite the patriotic sign, and having Jupiter there, it might be that, you know, he's a bit of a national treasure. I know that people kind of consider him to be of that ilk. But yeah, so he's got a very mercurial chart. He's got Neptune rising as well, which gives him that, Amy Winehouse had Moon Neptune. There's a kind of glamour or kind of courting the paparazzi feel about it, you know, like able to deal with the kind of the far-reaching web that Neptune can cast. It's very... it kind of outlives itself as well. Like you can't kind of erase it in a sense. It's not very clear. There's not a lot of clarity, but there's a lot of mystery or glamour that surrounds it. So if you think about like Amy Winehouse, she had a very short, very intense life, but she's remembered in a very glamorous way now. A lot of people, Marilyn Monroe is the same. Like she will live on in this very glamorous image of herself. And Paul McCartney, having that rising in his chart, that's a very interesting, he's he'll probably live on, if you know what I mean, through his music. He's definitely got a legacy there. Now, John Lennon, he has got Sun in Libra, well known for being in a relationship, the relationship that split up the Beatles, apparently, rumoured to have done. He's got Mars in Libra as well, so not very direct in its aggression. It's not a great place for Mars. I think, is it in fall or is it in detriment? I can never remember. My brain's muddled since having a baby. That's what I'll blame it on. It's not a very direct. It's quite a passive-aggressive placement for Mars. But he's got an Aquarius moon, which is trying that Mars, which is a nice outlet for him because he's actually able to channel his things that he's passionate about or angry about into some kind of activism. And we all know that he was very anti-war. He spoke out about, he was quite a well-known socialist. I don't know if he'd call himself a communist back then. I'm not really sure because I'm no expert on the Beatles. I'm no expert on Paul McCartney and John Lennon, by the way, but I'm just pointing out here a few interesting factors about their chart. Actually, John Lennon's got Venus in... My goodness, that's a giant UPS van just flying down the road. He's got Venus in Virgo, which is very close to John Lennon's North Node at 7 Virgo. And that I think that gives a sense of like a creative destiny that they have together. Interestingly, John Lennon has his nodes, North Node and South Node in Libra. So North Node Libra, South Node Aries, and quite close to his sun. So there's a sense of destiny. I guess he was born close to an eclipse, actually. It looks like he was born close to a lunar eclipse. Is it a lunar eclipse? A solar eclipse. Close to a solar eclipse. He's an eclipse baby. But yeah, there's a real sense of, a mission with John Lennon. There's a sense of having to do something for the good of the people with that Aquarius moon. Whereas with Paul McCartney, it's a lot more playful and a lot more creative for creativity's sake. And John Lennon also, his ascendant is in Aries. So all of his planets, I'm looking at their charts in a bi-wheel at the moment, but let me just switch it up. So John Lennon's planets all fall. Oh, so in the 6th house, but all around the descendant, basically. His son's around the descendant. So that kind of relationship message is kind of magnified. But there's a lot of, I'd say, work ethic. And, for him, work, as far as work's concerned, music was his work. It's a very collaborative feeling to it because, having his Sun, his Mars and his Neptune in the 6th house, even though the Sun is very close to the descendant, it puts a lot of emphasis on being able to work with others, and Libra is known to be quite cooperative. Then his Venus falls into Virgo in his 5th house. This is John Lennon. And he's actually, interestingly, so Paul McCartney's got the Saturn-Uranus conjunction. John Lennon's got the Saturn-Jupiter conjunction, and that's quite tight. That's at 13 Taurus. And we had a Jupiter-Saturn conjunction. I think it was December 2020? Or was it, I think it was December 2020, just going into 2021, I think. Yeah, I think so. And that was in an air sign, and it was just coming out from doing a whole 200-year cycle in, I think, earth signs. I'm sorry if I seem a bit like pulling information out of nowhere at the moment, but I am just a little bit scattered and aware of the time that I do not have a lot of to get this episode recorded. But anyway, so the Saturn-Jupiter conjunction, or Jupiter-Saturn, as we would normally say, the faster moving planet goes first. We would say, I would say that's quite interesting for John Lennon because it gives him an added political feel to his chart, because the Saturn and Jupiter are very, as far as like social planets are concerned, Jupiter is very much involved with politics, and Saturn is very much concerned with doing things the right way, respect and authority. So it's about relationships with authority, respect, belief, how you feel about the words yes and no, your own boundaries, where you implement boundaries, where you exceed boundaries. I had a really interesting chat with Alex Trenoweth. It's on the YouTube channel. It's also on this podcast. It's all about Jupiter-Saturn. That's where her work lies mostly, because she was a school teacher for many years, and she realised that all the school children in her class would have at least one thing in common in their charts, which was that they'd all be born with probably the same Jupiter and Saturn signs, give or take a year where they were changing sign and there was a potential shift. So she could see the relationship with authority and how they would, how they would work with their Jupiter and Saturn signs, not just individually, but actually as a kind of social group. It's very interesting. But John Lennon having that, and it also sits by equal house, it also sits in his 1st house, it's trine his midheaven, and it's opposite his Mercury. So it's really interesting because he spoke of political ideals. He was a very conscious person, and it was a time of great awakening and a great consciousness movement back then as well. The times that they kind of pioneered their sound through. So, I feel like with John Lennon, you can already hear from his natal chart that it has a slightly heavier feel to it, particularly his voice. He does have that serious and responsible sounding message in his music compared to Paul McCartney's, who is a much lighter, a much more, I don't want to say vibrant, but there's definitely a much more uplifting or playful sound to the music. You can hear the Gemini, you can hear the Leo. And actually Paul McCartney, I think that musicians with earth signs emphasised, so like with Virgo and with Capricorn, there's a real striving for perfection in the sound that they create. So even though Paul McCartney's got this light and fluffy sound to what he produces, he's still very accurate and very specific. I don't doubt there wasn't an element. I think that they're very hard-working when they got together, and individually as well. But with John Lennon, he definitely wanted to use his platform as more of a tool for making change, great change in society. And I think you can hear that with, his charm and his sort of likability with that, all that Libra stuff he's got in his chart, that Libra stellium. I think Frank Clifford calls it Teflon what was it? What did he call it? Oh, I can't remember what he calls it now, but it's like the Teflon effect. Anyone with a lot of Libra, because nothing seems to stick. They're just so charming, so likeable. But yeah, so there is this lovely Libra, ability to do things in a beautiful, creative, harmonic kind of sense. But then he's got this rather responsible, heavy opposition to his Mercury in Scorpio, remember, is quite intense. Is very driven into experiencing extremes, and probably extremes in thought. That Jupiter-Saturn conjunction, feeding into the midheaven. It's a very, like I said, very, I'd say conscious. And I don't know if I'd necessarily say conscious for Saturn and Jupiter normally, but it's in Taurus. He's got Uranus in Taurus natally. Now think about Uranus in Taurus at the moment. It's been travelling through since May 2018. It first dipped in, and then I think it was March 2019 Uranus got into Taurus, and it's there to stay for a while. I think it leaves in 2020. Is it 2026? I always get confused. Yes, 2026, because I think Pluto enters Aquarius next year, 2023, I think. And yeah, I think that Uranus is in Taurus for another few years. So yeah, he's going to have his Uranus return soon, which the chart lives on beyond us. So it'll be interesting to see what happens around John Lennon's Uranus return. We might see some films made about him, some music re-released and revamped in some way. It's always interesting to see what's going on in somebody's natal chart when they're having a major transit, like a planetary return. But he's got that very, I find that Uranus in Taurus so far seems to be very ethical about, clothing and the food that we're eating. Also great technological advancements in food. But, it's very forward thinking in a practical way, which just sort of gives us an added feel to that Saturn and Jupiter as well, because it's 3 planets he's got there, 2 social and 1 transpersonal, all sitting in Taurus. And Venus happens to be the ruler of his sun and also all of those planets. So Venus is a very important planet for John Lennon, and it's in that 5th house of creativity, of passion, which gives that added kind of outlet to his musical abilities. Now, just to wrap up, I guess my homework assignment to you guys is to listen to some Beatles. I think one of the best ones for listening to how their sounds are so different but they're so good together is A Day in the Life. I can't remember which album it's on. I think it might be, is it the White Album? I think so, I can't remember now. But it's called A Day in the Life. I'm sure you can hear it on Spotify. And A Day in the Life is that one that goes, I read the news today, oh boy. And it starts off with, I think, John Lennon, telling a story. I can't remember how it goes. I read the news today, oh boy. Da 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 in Blackburn, Lancashire. Ding a ding a ding a ding. And though the news was very sad, it's just like got a very there's a sort of sadness about it, and a kind of telling this story that brings you down, and then it goes into this great operatic kind of overture, all of the instruments playing together, and then boom into this really upbeat bit that Paul McCartney plays, which just suddenly goes bum 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 bum. Got up, got out of bed, and dragged a comb across my head. Ding a ding ding a ding a ding a ding ding. I'm sure you may have heard it. I've probably just murdered it. But the point is, their music styles are so different, but you hear them together and it's just like, wow. That's one of my favourite Beatles songs. There are so many good Beatles songs, but that's probably one of my favourites. And I think it's a great illustration of how 2 very different people can get together and sound either so individual but united, but at the same time bring their own individual flavour in that pulls you. That song pulls me in 2 directions, and I think that that's a really great one to listen to. I maybe I might have to do like a music Synastry series because there's so many bands. I'm a real music. I love music, I'm sure a lot of you do. We're all listening to podcasts. I think we're all very audible people here. So maybe you guys like music too. But yeah, homework assignment, listen to some Beatles. There's so many good albums. If you want to like add some extra dimensions, listen to a little bit of, I love George Harrison. Hearing My Sweet Lord, oh God, I love that song. And, Here Comes the Sun. There's just so many beautiful songs that, and then listen to them separately as well. Listen to their music separately. Paul McCartney's still going. There's so much that he did. He did music with Linda McCartney and Wings. John Lennon actually did. I don't know if I can share the link. If it's, I'll try and find it. One of my favourite ever things is the Rolling Stones Rock and Roll Circus. I think it came out in 1975. But John Lennon is a guest on that. It's just great to watch. Like, even if you just skip forward, if you're not a fan of the Rolling Stones, it doesn't matter, because like there's loads of different bands that go on there, and it's just fantastic. So yeah, I highly recommend that you check that out, and you can see John Lennon performing with Yoko Ono. My ex-boyfriend joked that John Lennon externalized his neurosis, and that Yoko Ono was his externalized neurosis. It's quite funny that he would say that. But anyway, just go check out the Beatles, have a little listen, see what you think. You can really hear their charts in the music. And I might just have to follow this up with another episode discussing another aspect of, Synastry in music. I've got one that's like a really, really bad one that I'm definitely doing, but I'm just getting ideas for more. So I hope you enjoyed today's episode. We are coming up very soon to the 200th episode. Thank you to everybody who's signing up to the YouTube channel. If you haven't already, please do pop over. I've got a little link at the bottom of this episode that you can just click on. If you'd like to go into a draw for a Magic of Eye astrological almanac towards the end of the year, just screenshot that you're listening to me on YouTube. Just subscribe and screenshot it and email it to me, stephanie@stelliumastrology.com. If you can include the word YouTube in the subject, I'm sure my emails will be able to recognise it and pull it out of the ocean of emails that I'm drowning in at the moment. But yeah, thank you to everyone who's done it already. I know it's not a huge number, but I'm reaching nearly 200 subscribers on YouTube, and to me that's a big deal. I'm really, really excited about it. And I've got some big changes coming up soon. I may be announcing before the 200th episode, or I may leave it to the 200th episode. However, if you are on the mailing list, which I would strongly recommend that you come over and subscribe to the mailing list, a lot of the big changes are going to be announced on there to my subscribers prior to anything being implemented. That's the plan anyway. I'm hoping to get time to write some newsletters. I'm changing the way I do things around here. It's all changing, but hopefully for the better. Anyway, I'm going to have to go because it's time for Parrot's Playground, where we get to sing and play with sensory toys and to sit in a room with loads of UV lights and just generally live out my late 1990s, early noughties raving days, but with my son and very clean living version. Take care, guys, and I'll speak to you next time for another interesting chat about Synastry. Bye.